Welcome to our Spring 2020 MSTEP Administration Training for Building and District Assessment Coordinators Training Series. This chapter will review important information and tasks that need to be done before testing. I am Phoebe Ghost, the MSTEP Administration and Reporting Consultant for the Michigan Department of Education. I'm going to begin this training session by introducing everything that's new for the MSTEP in 2020. Next, I will review the tasks that need to be done in the OEA A Secure Site. eDirect has been updated and is now called the DRC Insite Portal. We will review the tasks that are done in the DRC Insite Portal. Student supports and accommodations will be discussed, and then I will discuss what needs to be done to prepare staff and students for the MSTEP. First, what's new? Social Studies is a one-part test in all grades, 5, 8, and 11. As a note, this does not mean that every student is required to sit to complete the online test in one sitting. We have updated the test administration manual to include recommendations from MDE regarding the number and duration of test sessions and breaks within test sessions by content area. Review pages 53 and 54 for MDE recommendations regarding taking breaks within test sessions. Science is operational in 2020. Grades 5 and 8 will be 2 parts and require 2 test tickets for online testing, and grade 11 will have 1 part. Exciting this year, we've created an Excel spreadsheet that includes the important dates for all of the statewide assessment programs. This will help you when you are administering more than one assessment, or if you are responsible for more than one test mode or test window. You can filter according to what specific role and/or task you are responsible for, and have a document that includes all of the dates relevant to what you need, and none of the ones that you don't need. The PDF versions of the important dates are still available if that is your preferred way to look at the dates. Both documents, the Excel spreadsheet of important dates and the PDF version of the MSTEP important dates, are available on the MSTEP webpage under the What's New and Current Assessment Administration sections. TTS is available for directions only on all tests and test forms. Building or district assessment coordinators are responsible for deciding whether to use TTS for directions in their building or district. The test directions document that test administrators use during testing include a section to follow when administering with TTS for directions, and a separate section to use when administering without TTS for directions. It will be important that test administrators review the test directions prior to testing so that they know where to find the directions that they will use. On all tests, regardless of whether TTS for directions is being used, the launching of the Insite application, handing out test tickets, and the test selection, welcome, and audio check screens are completed together. Then the directions branch into sections for using TTS for directions and not using TTS for directions. If using the TTS for directions, students will listen to the directions with TTS after the audio check screen. There is an important note for any test session being administered without TTS for directions, and it is important that test administrators are made aware of this ahead of the test administration. The audio check screen exists on all tests, and the only way to move past the audio check screen is to play the audio check and verify that the sound is working. For students who are not using TTS for directions or as a designated support, they don't need any audio and may not have headphones, but they will still need to play this audio check. Directions are included in the test directions that test administrators read for this. Again, make sure test administrators read these directions before administering the test. So if a student does not have headphones and the device they are testing on has the volume turned on, then when they play the audio check, it will play the sound in the classroom. To avoid this, you should make sure that the device is muted before launching Insite. This way, the audio will not play out in the testing room. Another important note is that for students who are using TTS as a designated support, they will still need the audio check and they need to use headphones. It is typical that test sessions have some students using TTS for a designated support and some who are not. They are different directions in the test directions for test administrators to follow on the audio check screen based on whether there are or are not some students using TTS as a designated support in their test session. Again, make sure test administrators read the directions before testing day so that they are prepared and know what to do. The test directions documents have been updated and are now called the Test Administrator's Directions and Manual. They are still available by grade and test mode, meaning there is a Test Administrator's Directions and Manual document for grade 3 online and for grade 3 paper pencil, and for every other tested grade and test mode. In the past, test administrators have been required to read certain sections of the Test Administration Manual, or TAM, as well as the entire test directions document. To simplify this process and to be clear about what test administrators need to know, all of the information that test administrators need from the TAM is now included in the Test Directions and Manual document. Test administrators are no longer required to read portions of the TAM. They are now required to read the entire Test Administrator's Directions and Manual for the tests they will administer. We are working on building out a toolkit for building and district assessment coordinators to use as a resource for test administration training. These resources will include other assessment programs in the future, but for right now, there are 2 resources available: the MSTEP Test Administrator Checklist and PowerPoint template for test administration training. The checklist can be used by test administrators as they go through the training to check off the items that they have been trained on and to indicate what they know. It is structured as a series of I know statements and I know how to statements, listing the discrete content that test administrators need to know in order to successfully administer the MSTEP. The checklist can also be used by district or building assessment coordinators as they plan for test administration training to make sure they are covering everything that their test administrators will need to know. The PowerPoint template in the Test Administration Training Toolkit is used by district or building assessment coordinators when they are preparing their training. It is intended to be edited and modified based on the needs and policies and procedures of your building and district. It includes the slides that cover the required content, and text in purple needs to be modified for the specific policies and procedures of your school or district. You can also modify the template to include your school or district logo and templates. There has been an update to the required test security training for assessment coordinators and test administrators. All assessment coordinators are required to complete the test security modules and to read the assessment integrity guide. Test administrators must either complete the test security modules or read the assessment integrity guide. This is new from in the past when test administrators and assessment coordinators were all required to read the assessment integrity guide. Now the modules can replace that. An added benefit of using the test security modules is that once the modules are completed within the prior academic year, test administrators and assessment coordinators can take the refresher course instead of the full test security modules. The refresher course focuses on updates to test security requirements rather than the complete content. The way that this refresher course works is that you register for the full modules on MVU, and then, if the system recognizes that you have successfully completed the full course, you will be delivered the refresher course. It's not something that you select specifically. Rather, the system automatically delivers the refresher if there is record of you having taken the full modules already. Information about this required training is available on the MSTEP webpage at www.michigan.gov/MSTEP. I saved a whole slide to make sure that everyone knows that test security training does not replace the required test administration training. It is training that is done in addition to the test administration training. We've made some updates to the incident reporting requirements for spring 2020. The TAM's Incident Reporting Guide includes all of this information in detail, so be sure that you review that section of the TAM before the testing window begins. The first update for 2020 is that any testing irregularity is expected to be reported within 2 school days, either within 2 school days of the testing irregularity itself, or within 2 school days of you being notified of the testing irregularity. Remember, you must report all testing irregularities. Do not neglect to report a testing irregularity if it was not reported within 2 school days. This is to ensure that irregularities are reported in a timely manner so that we can work with you to appropriately resolve the issue. There are also updates to testing irregularities that are reported due to an error in the administration of a designated support or accommodation. These are the most common incidents that we receive, and the vast majority of those incidents are incidents where a student completed a test without a required designated support or accommodation. So for 2020, if a designated support that should have been provided wasn't provided, then the school must submit a signed form from the parent indicating the reason for the need to retest and permission to retest. If you have been involved in this type of incident in the past, then you will be aware that this is not new. MDE has a template that you use to provide the parent. You complete the grade, content area, designated support. Then the parent decides which option and signs the form. What is new in 2020 is that for a designated support, the educator who is responsible for day-to-day instruction in the content area needs to sign a statement that affirms that the student uses that designated support as a part of daily instruction. There is not a form for this. The educator can write or type a statement as simple as, "I affirm that," insert student's name, uses, and list the designated support, as a part of daily instruction, and also include the content area, and then sign the statement. For testing irregularities where an accommodation that is assigned in the student's IEP or Section 504 plan was not administered, the signed parent form is still required, and beginning in 2020, you will need to upload the appropriate page or pages from the student's IEP or Section 504 plan. Only upload the page or pages that indicate required testing accommodations. And please note here that something that is considered a designated support on MSTEP can be administered as a required accommodation, such as TTS items only. This is technically a designated support for MSTEP, but an IEP team may include TTS or read aloud as an accommodation in the IEP. In situations like these, then this is a required accommodation and the procedures for accommodations should be followed. Also updated, based on research and feedback from the field, there are going to be 3 new instances where, if it's reported on the day that it happens, we will be able to regenerate tests in situations where we have not previously offered this option. First, if a student becomes ill and goes home on test day. This is for those situations where a student sits to complete an entire test, then you find out or figure out later that the student was ill enough to have to go home sick on that day. Again, the incident must be reported by 11:59 p.m. on the day it occurs. The second instance is when a student begins a test and submits it in fewer than 15 minutes. This is for students who start and end the test on the same test day in less than 15 minutes. This will not apply to a student who signs into a test on one day, spends 5 minutes testing, then logs in on a second day and spends 5 minutes testing and submits the test. This applies to students who sit down all in one day for fewer than 15 minutes and submit the test on that day. Again, you must submit the incident report on the day the irregularity occurred. The last instance is if you have a student who has prescribed medication but does not take their medication on test day. Again, it must be submitted on the day of the incident. So there is required documentation, but before I get into that, know that you can submit the incident report without this documentation so that it is submitted on the same day, and then gather the documentation after the incident is reported. You just have to get the incident submitted on the same day. We can help you with getting the documentation in a timely manner, but only if you initially submit the incident on the day the irregularity occurs. So again, for all of these situations, you need documentation that the parent is providing permission to take the test again. This is required in any instance of a regeneration. Next, you need to submit verification of the incident. For students who become ill, this should typically be an attendance record indicating the student went home ill. For students who didn't take their medication, a statement from a teacher, staff member, or parent who has reason to know whether a student took their medication is sufficient. And for students who spend fewer than 15 minutes testing, MDE can verify that through the DRC Insite Portal once the test has been submitted. MDE can only see the time spent testing after the test has been submitted. And remember, this is for a test that was started and completed all in one sitting on the same day. eDirect is now called the DRC Insite Portal. It has a new look on the login screen, but the overall organization of the site hasn't changed. Once you sign in, you will see that everything looks very similar to eDirect. One thing that is different is how test administrators access the things they need to use, such as the tutorials. Remember that test administrators don't need a secure login to the DRC Insite Portal. So the link they will follow is the word "here" that you can see the red arrow pointing to here. You'll need to show this to your test administrator so that they know where to look. Off-site testing continues to be available for schools who have a need to test off-site and for individual students who receive homebound services, students who are suspended, or students who are expelled with services. What's new is that these requests are now submitted through the OEA A Secure Site. There is no longer a link to the request form on the MSTEP webpage. Instead, go to the Secure Site, select the Assessment Registration tab, and then select Off-Site Test Administration Requests from the drop-down menu. Detailed instructions for how to fill out this request form are available on the Secure Site training page at www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining. The window to submit this form is open now. It runs from February 10 through May 29, 2020. As you are hopefully aware at this point, the testing window for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7 has been moved ahead a week so that the window opens on April 27 and runs through Friday, May 22nd. This is to accommodate the Read by Grade 3 legislation that requires adequate time to address the required 30-day parental appeal window. MDE is recommending schools administer third grade assessments during the first week of the window to make sure that all of the testing is completed in the timely manner and to allow time in case there are any issues that come up and need to be resolved. Preliminary scale scores on the third grade ELA test will be used to determine which of the Read by Grade 3 indicators that students will receive. Students scoring above 1271 will meet the requirements of the law. Students scoring between 1253 and 1271 will have an indicator that means they are eligible for promotion to fourth grade, but will need support to be successful. And students scoring below 1253 will be eligible for retention. Per the legislation, letters will be sent by CEPI directly to parents to students who fall into the eligible for retention category. Schools are able to view the student preliminary scores within 48 hours of the student submitting the test, and usually by the next day. An indicator on the third grade ELA test will show how each student scored. This will be how schools can monitor which students will be eligible for retention before parents receive the letter from CEPI. I'm going to take a few minutes here to review student supports and accommodations. During testing, issues with supports and accommodations are a frequent testing irregularity that is reported through our incident reporting tool, and accurate identification of student-designated supports and accommodations before testing begins can help prevent a lot of these issues from occurring. So, I'm going to walk through what they are, some suggestions for helping keep track of what supports each student needs, and then how to assign them in the DRC Insite Portal. First, when we speak about universal tools, these are tools that are available to all students. An example of this would be the highlighter. It's available on each item in the online test for all students, and schools are allowed to provide highlighters for paper pencil testers. Just make sure they're not using it on the answer document. So this is a tool for everyone. Students can use it if they find it helpful. Designated supports are available for students based on their specific need. These are decided by educators, and they should be supports that are used in day-to-day instruction. The most common example of a designated support is TTS for items only. Again, this should be decided individually by student, never assigned to a whole class, grade, or content area, and it should be something that the student is using in day-to-day instruction. Finally, accommodations are available for students whose IEP or 504 plan documents the need for this accommodation. To help clarify about text-to-speech or TTS, there are two different types of TTS. TTS for items only, or just TTS, and TTS passage. TTS is a designated support. It reads only the items on the test and can be assigned based on the specific need of the student. TTS passage is an accommodation that is available for grades 6 and 7 ELA only. TTS passage reads the passages and the items. This can only be assigned if TTS or read aloud is listed in the student's IEP or 504 plan. This is not available as an accommodation at all for anyone for grades 3 through 5 ELA because it would change the construct or what is being measured on the test. This slide reviews what is included for TTS and for TTS passage. TTS is available in all content areas, and it will read questions and answer options. There are no reading passages on the mathematics, science, or social studies assessments. TTS passage for grades 6 and 7 ELA will read the passages as well as the question and answer options. It is important that you take time before testing to create a process that you will use to review which tools students are using in the classroom as a first step in thinking about supports and accommodations on the test. Then, you should work with your team to determine if there is a match between what is used in the classroom and what is available on the MSTEP. Do not review the list of available designated supports and accommodations and then try to fit them into the student or students. Start with what happens in the classroom, and then find what matches in the supports and accommodations guidance. You can find the supports and accommodations guidance document on the MSTEP webpage at www.michigan.gov/MSTEP under the Student Supports and Accommodations heading. There is some good information in there, including some template documents that will help you keep track of what you should and should not be assigning for students. Make sure you take a look at this document. Before testing, which means now, you should meet with staff who are involved in students' day-to-day instruction, including special education staff, to determine what students need during testing. Once you have this information, either using the template that's provided on the MSTEP webpage or in another format that you have, then you should assign all of the universal tools, designated supports, or accommodations in the DRC Insite Portal. Once this is done, make sure that your test administrators are made aware of all supports and accommodations that students need in their test sessions. This is important because not every support or accommodation is necessarily delivered through the testing engine, and if there are any issues with anything, the students will be notifying their test administrator. Some schools use Google Sheets or other collaborative software to make sure that everyone's aware of what is needed. Again, you can use this process or another process, but the important thing is that all test administrators know every support and accommodation that each student should or should not have in each test session. This is an important role of the assessment coordinator. Then, once everyone knows everything they need to know, you'll need to make sure they have access to all the materials to provide the supports and accommodations. This means things like headphones for TTS or calculators for grade 6 or 7 students who are using a handheld calculator. You assign students universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations in the DRC Insite Portal to ensure that students receive the appropriate supports during testing. You can see whether a support is a universal tool, abbreviated UT, designated support, abbreviated DS, or accommodation, abbreviated AC, in the DRC Insite Portal on the screen where you assigned them. Make sure that you are working with educators to assign these appropriately. Also, you must assign all designated supports and accommodations before you print any test tickets. If test tickets are printed before you have assigned the designated supports and accommodations, they will not be available on the student's test. Next, we are going to discuss the tasks that need to be done before testing. This is the bulk of the tasks that need to be done by assessment coordinators, getting everything set up and ready for the test administration. We'll go through each of these tasks one by one. I will go over general information about each of these tasks, but in some cases, I will refer you to training resources that are extant on the web pages or in other trainings. Before testing begins, you're going to need to create your building and district testing schedule. These are required to be maintained for 3 years, and they must include the information included on this slide. District and building name, building assessment coordinator's name, the date, location, and starting and ending time of the test administration, the assessment grade and content, and finally test administrator and proctor names for each testing session. There's a template available in the Assessment Integrity Guide, AIG, or on the MSTEP webpage. Again, that's www.michigan.gov/MSTEP under the current assessment administration. You're not required to use this template. You can create your own, but you need to have this information on it. MDE provides these test time estimates to help you as you build your testing schedule. As a reminder, this is total time testing. It doesn't include logging into the test, passing out test tickets, reading directions, or anything else. This is just for the actual time spent testing. What's new here for 2020 is the science test. It is divided into Part 1 and Part 2, with 45 minutes for each. ELA for all grades is still estimated at 2 hours. Math is 1.5 hours for grades 3 through 5 and 2 hours for grades 6 and 7. In the MSTEP Test Administration Manual, or TAM, we have added a section with MDE recommendations for how and when to take testing breaks. Look on pages 53 and 54 for the number and duration of test sessions by content area and recommendations for how to administer the tests and schedule or take breaks within a test session. Here are the estimates for grade 8. Remember that MSTEP is not a timed test. Students should be provided adequate time to complete testing. As a note for those of you who are responsible for 8th grade testing, this is not the case for PSAT 8-9 for grade 8. The PSAT 8-9 is a timed test. Look in the PSAT 8-9 Test Coordinator's Manual for information about PSAT 8-9. And here we have 11th grade. Again, MSTEP is not a timed test, but these estimates are provided here. Make sure you are reading the manuals for college entrance and ACT for those tests. So we'll start with the OEA A Secure Site. This is a site that you will use quite frequently throughout testing. It's an OEA A web application that is used for many testing tasks, and a lot of these tasks are done before testing, but a few are done during or after testing. In the OEA A Secure Site, you will pre-identify your students for all state assessments. It's where you print barcode labels for paper pencil answer documents, in case you were not able to pre-ID before the deadline for shipping of barcode labels. As a note, if you did have any students pre-ID'd for paper pencil testing before the initial material order window, then you will get a blank sheet of labels that you can use to print your barcode labels from the secure site. Which leads me to ordering paper pencil assessment materials. Your pre-ID list of students is what determines your initial material order, unless you go in to select additional items at that time. If something changes after the initial material order, You have a student who needs paper pencil materials that you didn't previously plan on, or you have students who enroll who need testing materials, then you can place an additional material order according to the dates in the important dates documents. And you can place all of these orders in the OEA A Secure Site. Prior to February 24, you could group students into online sessions in the OEA A Secure Site, and those were pulled into the DRC Insite Portal. It's okay if you didn't get this done by February 24. You can still group students into online test sessions within the DRC Insite Portal, but that opens on March 6th, so you'll have to wait for then to do it. During testing, you report any testing irregularities for MSTEP in the OEA A Secure Site, and after testing, you use the Secure Site for the accountable students and test verification processes, and you access student test scores, data files, and reports through the OEA A Secure Site. So as you can see, you're going to need access to the OEA A Secure Site throughout testing. If you don't already have access, this slide tells you how to fix that. You log into the OEA A Secure Site using your MEIS login and password. That will bring up the Request Access page, which gives you directions for how to request access. If you need detailed instructions or additional help, then the Secure Site training page can help you. Go to the www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining and click right at the top on the link, How do I get access to the Secure Site? The OEA PreID'd students based on your fall MSDS General Collection, Student Count Day, on January 8. There are no additional polls for PreID that are done by MDE after that date, which means that any enrollment changes after your fall student count date needs to be inputted by you into the OEA A Secure Site. Depending on the changes that you've had in enrollment and the accuracy of the MSDS General Collection data for your school or district, you can PreID students one at a time using the student search, or if you have a lot of students to add, you can follow the PreID file format and template to upload a lot of students. Or, if you are confident in the accuracy of the data in MSDS, you can use the MSDS copy function in the Secure Site. There is a ton of step-by-step instructions available for each of these methods of PreID on the Secure Site training page. Again, it's www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining. And I will suggest you may want to either memorize that web address or add it to your bookmarks in your browser. It's helpful for PreID and for login information, but it has help documents for anything you need to do on the Secure Site. This is a screenshot of the student search page with obfuscated data on it. That first column lists the student's UIC, and then where the arrow is where the student name is. Then you can see birth date and gender. As a note, you can search by student information, which is what is selected here in the upper left, or by UIC or barcode. MDE does suggest that you use or at least verify the student UIC number. There are a lot of students who have the same or similar name, and even birth date isn't always different among students in the whole state who have the same name. We do get a few incident reports each year where the wrong UIC student has been PreID'd for testing, and then they complete the test with the wrong UIC and it's showing as out of level because they took a test that is in a different grade level than the actual student, or the student who is actually expected to test according to MSDS is listed as not tested because the student took the test under the wrong UIC. These are difficult to resolve because it's a manual process to move student test data from one UIC to another, and it is not something that is often done. So be sure that you PreID the correct student with the correct UIC, and you can avoid all of that. So, once you've found the student, and you know that you have the correct UIC, then you can select PreID Student. That is this screen that you see here. You'll need to make sure that you PreID to the correct test cycle, ISD, district, school, and grade. Also, you can see the required information is listed here in red. At the bottom of the screen, you can see other student information. such as if the student is an English language learner, or if the student is identified as EL, former English learner, special education, homeschooled, migrant, economically disadvantaged, homeless, in foster care, or military connected. This is where you'll enter the test mode. That means paper, pencil, or online. And you can also assign your reporting codes or research codes here. Next, we will discuss pre-identification using the PreID file upload. On the login screen, you can download the PreID file upload template. This is important because you need to use this specific layout in order for your upload to work in the OEA A Secure Site. And you need to follow the codes and abbreviations that are listed in the template. I'll show you a part of the template on the next page. So this is just a section of the PreID file upload template. You can see that it shows you the field length, the data type to be inputted, and then the field name and specific information about how to complete each row. As you can see, for example, the SDS grade code must be inputted, and you input kindergarten as 00, not K, or just 0. You can also see the requirements for inputting the student last, first, and middle name, and the specific codes used to identify student ethnicity. Again, this is a part of the PreID file upload template. If you're going to PreID using this method, make sure that you follow the requirements listed here. So here's your PreID file upload document. It has the columns already listed. You just input the data according to the requirements listed in the template. Just as an idea, which at this point would have to be for next year, some schools will maintain this document from student count day in the fall up until it's time to PreID students, so that this information has been inputted as students enroll, and then it's all ready to go when you're ready to validate your PreID student list. This screen shows you the MSDS copy process for pre-identifying students. You can see in the box under PreID method, the MSDS copy option has been selected. It's important that you use the information as submitted in MSDS in order for this to work. And in order to make sure that you have accurate reporting of results, both for the students who are expected to test for accountability calculations, but also in order to view the students' results. Once you've inputted the information on the previous screen, you will view this screen, again obfuscated for privacy. You need to select the destination test cycle, that is the test cycle that you are pre-identifying the student to test in, and then grade and content area. Here you can see the Mass Update Assessment screen. From here, you can change the testing mode, online or paper pencil. You copy students from MSTEP to MyAccess. Remember when you do this to remove the student from MSTEP for that content area. And then you copy students from one component of MME to another component, all done as groups of students instead of individually. I have a note about pre-identification of students for MyAccess. Each year, MDE receives a few incident reports where a student has completed both the MSTEP and MyAccess assessment in the same content area. In order for this to occur, you have a student who sat down twice to take a test in the same content area, which is not something anyone wants to see happen. One reason that this happens is that an assessment coordinator either forgets or is not aware that the student who is pre-identified to MyAccess has to be removed from MSTEP. This is not automatic. Make sure that you remove students from MSTEP who are taking MyAccess in that content area. Another issue can happen if you haven't finalized your PreID list before students are pulled into the DRC Insite Portal, which this year happened on February 24. If you have any students who are taking MyAccess in a content area that are still pre-ID'd to MSTEP in that content area on February 24, then they will be pulled into the DRC Insite Portal. And once a student is pulled into the DRC Insite Portal, they cannot be removed. When this happens, If the student is listed in a test session, then there will be test tickets generated and printed when you print the test tickets. And once there's a printed test ticket, it is natural for a test administrator to administer the test, assuming that if a student has a test ticket, then the student should test. One way that some schools have solved this potential problem is to create a test session that is called not testing or something like that, where they can put those students so that there's no ticket printed out and therefore no reason for the test to be taken. Remember, accountability calculations are made based on MSDS enrollment data, not what's in the DRC Insite Portal, so it's not an issue if you have students who are in the DRC Insite Portal as not testing. If you need more information about how to use this screen, there are detailed step-by-step instructions available on the Secure Site training page. Again, www.michigan.gov/securesitetraining. The PreID Student report is available so that you can view students who are pre-identified for testing, including by grade and content area, mode of testing, that is paper, pencil, or online, and demographic information based on what exists in MSDS. You can use this page to unassign students from an assessment if you notice any errors in your PreID list. Here is what the student PreID student report looks like. Each column can be filtered so that you can look at this list based on any of the listed categories. You can also see the total count pre-ID'd by content area and total according to test mode. Remember, you can unassign students from testing if you see them on this list, but they should not be. This is another opportunity to verify your students who are taking My Access in a content area are not also pre-ID'd for MSTEP. Search by test period and then select Spring 2020. Barcode labels are required for all paper pencil answer documents. You have to have a student barcode label for each content area on each student's answer document. If you pre-identified by February 12, then barcode labels will be printed and shipped with your initial material order. If not, then you have to print them from the OEA A Secure Site. From this screen, you search by test cycle, ISD, district, and school, and you can filter your results by student name, UIC, grade, or test mode, paper, pencil, or online, to print barcode labels. This note pops up on your screen when you select Print Barcodes on the lower left of the search results. There are specific labels and settings that are required when you're printing your barcode labels, so make sure you read this so that your barcodes are printed correctly. All material orders for MSTEP are done through the OEA A Secure Site, and they are sent to the MSTEP coordinator as listed in EEM. Make sure your EEM information is up to date. You can select from the default delivery date or an alternate date in case your building has a break or need of the alternate date. IMOs are sent based on your pre-ID information, whereas AMOs, additional material orders, are placed by you based on materials that you select in the Secure Site. Make sure you look at the List of Important Dates document for the dates for these timeframes. We are asked frequently what comes in the initial material orders, which are based on pre-ID count. So here we go. Everyone receives OEA A security compliance forms, the return kit, which includes the FedEx air bills, instructions for materials return, scorable labels, and special handling envelopes. Plus, they receive the test administrator's directions and manual, either online and or paper pencil, depending on their pre-ID count. The test administrator's directions and manuals are sent at a rate of 1 per 20 pre-ID'd students. Then, for schools that only have online testing in their pre-ID count, if they have 6th or 7th grade students, they will also receive 1 graph paper per student. For schools that have any student pre-ID'd for paper pencil testing, then they will receive blank labels that you can print barcodes on if necessary, listening scripts and CDs, of course the test booklets and answer documents, and your printed pre-ID labels based on the students who are pre-ID'd to paper pencil testing on or before February 12th. Make sure that you inventory all of your secure materials when you receive them. Use the packing slip that's included in your delivery to verify that everything listed on the packing slip is included in your order. If there are any secure materials that are required to be returned to the scoring contractor, such as listening scripts or CDs, accommodated versions of the test booklets, etc., that are not returned, you will be required to locate the missing materials. You cannot say at that point that you didn't receive them. You need to tell us that at the time of delivery. If you do your inventory and there are any materials that are on your packing list that you did not receive, send us an email at mde-oeaa@michigan.gov so that we can locate these missing materials. On our random visits to schools, management of secure materials comes up as an issue, so this slide is a reminder. All secure materials must be remained in a secure locked location within the school. This cannot be just in a locked office, like on the principal or assessment coordinator's desk, because it's possible that the office can be left unattended and the materials are not secure. They need to be in a locked cabinet or a locked drawer when not in use. Next, all secure materials must be distributed and collected each day. Secure materials for online testing are test rosters and test tickets in any used scratch or graph paper. For paper pencil testing, secure materials can include test booklets, used answer documents, L1 glossaries, any accommodated version of the test, listening CDs or scripts, reader scripts, used scratch or graph paper, and more. Make sure you review the TAM if you have any questions about what are secure materials. Look on page 63 for more information about materials and materials handling. This is the Initial Material Orders screen, or IMOs. You search by test cycle, and then you can select your shipping destination and your delivery dates for each window. The first date listed is the default date, but you can change that in case there's something happening in your district or building during that week. The address listed is based on the address for the MSTEP coordinator in EEM. Make sure you verify that this is correct so that your materials are sent to the correct place. IMOs are automatically generated based on your PreID count. This window has closed for spring 2020, but you can view your order from this screen. You can still place material orders if you have need for additional materials. The windows for additional material orders are listed here. April 7 through 28 at noon for grades 5, 8, and 11, and April 28 through May 19 for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7. These dates are also listed in the important dates documents. The DRC Insite Portal is the system used to manage online test sessions, assign designated supports and accommodations, to print and manage test tickets, and during testing to monitor student testing status. Access to the DRC Insite Portal is granted through the OEA A Secure Site, based on your role assignment in the OEA A Secure Site. If you need help getting access to the DRC Insite Portal, go to the Secure Site training page, again, at www.michigan.gov/secure-site-training, and select the document under Security called How Do I Get Access to the DRC Insite Portal? The DRC Insite Portal will become available for online and test administration tasks beginning on March 6th. Students who are pre-ID'd and put into online test sessions in the OEA A Secure Site by February 24 will be copied into the DRC Insite Portal and put into test sessions. But you can still pre-ID students in the OEA A Secure Site, and these students will be copied into the DRC Insite Portal 3 times a day. These students who are pre-ID'd after February 24 will need to be added to test sessions in the DRC Insite Portal. Once your pre-ID is done, test sessions are set up, and you have assigned all Universal Tools designated supports and accommodations, then you can print your test tickets. A quick reminder, you have to assign Universal Tools designated supports and accommodations before test tickets are generated. If you print your test tickets and then add a support afterwards, the support won't be available when the student logs into test. To print your test tickets, log into the DRC Insite Portal, select Test Management, and then go to Manage Test Sessions. Complete the administration, entity information, grade, and content area, and select Show Sessions. This will bring back all of the test sessions according to your filtered results. You can select test tickets to print, or you can select Print All Tickets to print all of the test tickets for the filtered results that are shown. Test tickets can also be printed individually. You select the Edit Print icon shown in the first image, and then select the student or students whose test ticket you are printing, and then select Print Selected. There are mini modules, each one no longer than 5 minutes long, that explain in detail how to do each function in the DRC Insite Portal. Once you're logged in, go to General Information, then select the Documents tab, and filter on the mini modules and select Show Documents. It is important that students are aware of how the items on the test work and the tools that are available to them before testing day. This ensures that students can focus on the content and not the testing engine on test day. There are student tutorials and online tools training, or OTTs, that should be used. You can launch Insight, and the tutorials are the yellow link at the bottom, and you can see the OTTs listed under each assessment logo. You can also access them from the MSTEP webpage as long as you use a Chrome browser. Go to the Parent-Student Information section and select the link Online Practice for MSTEP ELA Math, Science, and Social Studies. The page that opens has a link to the OTTs on the top portion of the page. To prepare students for testing, MDE recommends that a teacher view the tutorials with students as a class and then models the use of OTTs. Once students are familiar with this, then they should have an opportunity to practice with the OTTs on the device they will use during testing. The image here shows you what the tutorials look like. They're each a short video that focuses on one thing in the test. They use a child's voice, and there is closed captioning on each tutorial. This is mostly a reminder to make sure you're aware of the scratch paper and calculator policy before testing begins. They're available in the MSTEP TAM in the appendices. Briefly, scratch and graph paper are universal tools. Graph paper is required for grades 6 and 7 mathematics and optional for grades 3 through 5. If scratch paper is used, it is a secure material. Make sure that you collect it after testing and securely destroy it. For calculators, there are no calculators allowed for grade 3, 4, and 5 mathematics, even if students have the accommodation listed in their IEP or 504 plan. It changes the construct, or what is being measured, of the test. For grades 6 and 7, they are available on the mathematics test. For the online test, calculators are made available on items that have a calculator allowed. If there is no calculator on an item, it is not allowed on that item. If you have a student in grade 6 or 7 who wants to use a handheld calculator and is an online tester, this is only allowed if it is listed as an accommodation in the student's IEP, and it should only be provided on items that include a calculator on the item. This needs to be monitored by the test administrator. For paper-pencil testing at grade 6 or 7, there are no calculators on Part 1, but they are allowed on Part 2. Are you signed up for the Spotlight? It's our weekly newsletter that includes all of the important information that you need to know throughout the year. It comes out on Thursday afternoons. If you're not signed up yet, go to www.michigan.gov/mstep, scroll down until you see the Spotlight logo, click it, and you can sign up there. Thanks for joining me for this first chapter of the 2020 MSTEP Administration Training. You can see our contact information here if you have any questions. Email mde-oeaa@michigan.gov or call 877-560-8378 and follow the prompts. Also, if you have ideas, suggestions, or ways that you manage your test administration tasks that you think other schools might find helpful, send us an email. We include those tips in Spotlight articles, and all of the helpful hints that you see in the TAM came from tips from folks in the field. Let us know what's working for you. Make sure that you join me for Chapter 2 of this training, where we will discuss the tasks that need to be done during testing.